They call it the Dnieper Wall, a grandiose line drawn in the black Ukrainian mud and blood, a barrier Berlin fanatically insists is an impenetrable shield against Bolshevism. I look at my maps, these sheets of paper that are supposed to represent reality, and I see only this jagged wedge, a German finger of steel poking defiantly deep into Soviet territory. I can already feel the cold wind of history blowing through its cracks. My superiors in the high command speak of this position as a strategic springboard for a great new offensive to retake Kiev, as if the men in the trenches aren't already gray with exhaustion, frozen to the bone, and down to their last handful of ammunition. Those in Berlin are still staring at maps from 1941, dreaming of blitzkrieg victories that faded long ago. They completely underestimate the Red Army, refusing to accept that today's Ivan is not the terrified peasant of 3 years ago. The Soviet bear has learned to hunt in the harshest winter. He has become cunning and ruthless, while we stand here motionless, pinned by Hitler's insane order forbidding any retreat. We stand like a tethered sacrifice at the edge of the forest, while the wolves we provoked with our own hubris emerge from the dark. January has brought us the Rasputitsa, the season when roads cease to exist and become liquid graves. The ground has turned into a bottomless, sticky soup of black mud that swallows tanks up to their turrets and turns simple logistics into a weekly agony where horses are driven to their deaths. In the warm, safe bunkers of the rear command, generals believe this same mud will protect us, naively thinking the Russians are as stuck in place as we are. What a terrible delusion. Every day I receive reports that say otherwise. I see Soviet T-34 tanks with their wide tracks moving almost with ease across frozen marshes and fields where our heavy panzers simply sink and are abandoned. My colonels, men from the front lines, warn of massive, almost silent troop movements to our north and south. It is a classic, textbook double envelopment being prepared before our eyes while we sit still. But whenever I pick up the phone and ask for a tactical withdrawal to save what is left of my divisions, the answer from Berlin is always the same, cold and robotic. The Führer has strictly forbidden even a centimeter of retreat. We are not building a defense. We are building the walls of our own cage with our pride and wet earth. The blow came with a speed that completely paralyzed our chain of command, leaving us in a state of disbelief. On January 24th, the 1st and 2nd Ukrainian front struck with the power of thunder through a leaden gray sky. It was not a battle in the classical sense. It was a precise, surgical bisection of our front, executed with surgical coldness. I watched, helpless, as those thick red arrows on my map raced toward each other, cutting our supply and communication lines with a terrifying momentum that completely ignored the snow and the storm. At Zvenohorodka, those two massive steel arms met with the crash of artillery. In a single, decisive move, 60,000 German soldiers, the very heart of the 11 and XLI Corps, were cut off from the rest of the world. My map, once covered with the proud blue markings of our expansion, now displays only one lonely, fragile blue circle in a sea of red. We are no longer an offensive force. We have become a Kessel, a cauldron, and the fire beneath us is only just beginning to ignite, as we realize we have become victims of our own strategy of immobility. The ghost of Stalingrad has returned, creeping like a fog into every corridor of my command post. Berlin is once again sending us its hollow promises of an air bridge. They tell us, in the same tone they used to lie to Paulus, that the Luftwaffe will deliver every grain of wheat, every liter of fuel, and every bullet we need to hold out until we are liberated. I hear the heavy engines of the Ju-52 transport planes struggling through the blizzard, hunted by Soviet fighters that now absolutely rule the skies above us. For every ton of supplies that falls into our hands, 10 tons end up in the deep snow or in flames in enemy territory. My soldiers, once proud warriors, are now slaughtering horses to survive and counting every bullet as if it were gold, while the radio shamelessly continues to broadcast messages that victory is within reach. I look at the map of our perimeter shrinking by the hour. It looks like a lung from which all air is being slowly but relentlessly squeezed. We are holding a fortress that has neither roof nor walls, only a horizon filled with the fire of Soviet Katyusha rockets. Somewhere out there to the west, outside our encirclement, General Hube and his 3 Panzer Corps are fighting a superhuman battle to reach us. In rare moments of silence, I can almost hear the distant rumble of their Tiger tanks as they push through the ice. On our map, that narrow strip of land separating us is slowly narrowing. 30 kilometers, 20, 15. Hope is the most dangerous weapon in an environment like this. It makes men believe in miracles while standing before a firing squad. I see the faces of my officers light up when they hear the panzers are coming. But on that same map, I see the massive Soviet reserves massing to intercept them. Stalin is pouring entire tank armies into that gap, building a wall of steel that Hube, despite all his genius, cannot break. Our saviors are exhausted, running out of fuel and ammunition just 10 kilometers from our forward positions. Those 10 kilometers, in this snow, they might as well be 10,000 kilometers. I realize the painful truth. We are on our own, and the arrogant strategy of our leadership has left us to bleed out in a circle of fire. Today, through the blizzard, under a white flag, a Soviet negotiator arrived. He brought an ultimatum signed by Marshals Zhukov and Konyev. They offer us an honorable surrender, medical aid for our wounded and safety for the survivors. I held that paper in my trembling hands, feeling the terrible weight of the fates of 60,000 men on my shoulders. As an officer, I was raised to fight to the end, but as a man, I look into the eyes of soldiers who no longer have the strength even to hold a rifle. Berlin, of course, immediately rejected any thought of surrender, calling it treason. For them, we are just numbers on a map meant to buy a little more time for their illusions in the bunker. I rejected the ultimatum because I had no choice, but with that rejection, I signed the death warrant for thousands. On the map, the enemy's red lines are now becoming thicker, darker, ready for the final assault that will turn this cauldron into a mass grave covered with a white shroud. We have retreated to Shenderovka, the last village we can still call our own. It is not a place, it is the foyer of hell. Thousands of wounded lie on the floors of peasant huts, without bandages, without morphine, while outside the walls the temperature drops deep below zero. On the map, our cauldron has shrunk to the size of a single point. There is no more room for maneuver, no shelter from the artillery that constantly plows the earth. I have made the decision Berlin forbade. Tomorrow night, we break out. We will not wait for a permission that will never come, nor for a rescue that is stuck in the mud. Officers are burning classified documents and maps. Ashes fly through the air, mixing with the snow. I look at my men, shadows of a former army, and I know that for many of them, tomorrow will be their last day. On the map I extinguish last, I have drawn only one arrow, toward the west. It is the path to freedom, or the path to eternity. The night of the breakout has finally arrived, bringing with it a blizzard that has become our only ally. In total silence, without an artillery preparation that would give us away, thousands of men emerge from the ruins of Shenderovka. I ordered that no one fire, only bayonets and raw strength. On the map of my mind, that path is marked with blood. I see the columns moving like black snakes across the white field. We are leaving behind the wounded who cannot walk. That is a wound that will never heal in the heart of a commander. We leave them with a few medics and a prayer, while the Russian Ura is heard in the distance. Our maps are irrelevant now. The only navigation is the flash of enemy shells showing us where death is thickest. We are no longer an organized army. We are a stampede of desperate men charging into the dark, driven by an instinct for survival that transcends all tactics. We have reached the Gnylyi Tikych River, a cold and swift barrier standing between us and freedom. Soviet tanks have caught up with us. The fire from their barrels lights up the night with ghostly flashes. On the map, this was just a blue stream, but in reality, it is an icy grave. There are no bridges, no time to build. Men jump into the water, holding on to each other, while the current carries them away into the darkness. I watch my XLI cord disintegrate under artillery fire. The snow is no longer white. It is soaked with so much blood that it appears black under the moonlight. Our officers, those who survived, stand on the bank and vainly try to bring order to the chaos. This is the moment when all the tactical errors of Berlin, all that underestimation of the enemy, gathers into a single scream of thousands of men vanishing into the freezing water. My role as commander ends here, in the snow that slowly covers my uniform. I stayed with the rear guard, with those who had to protect the back while the main body tried to break through. I look into the distance, toward the west, where the first lights of the German lines appear. They made it. Some of them made it. On the map of my life, this is the final point. I see Soviet tanks approaching my position. Their silhouettes are like monsters from a nightmare. I feel no fear, only an endless fatigue and sadness for all those who remained lying in this curse. My map is now completely red. It has covered everything we once conquered. I fell not by the hand of the enemy, but by the arrogance of a system that thought it could command nature and human endurance from a warm office in Berlin. Stemmermann is dead. The Russians found him, map in hand, frozen beside his car. Of the 60,000 men who entered the cauldron, less than half made it out. And those who did, brought with them eyes that have seen too much. On the General Staff's map, the Korsun Pocket has simply been erased, as if it never happened, as if those men were not made of flesh and blood. The officers in Berlin are already drawing new lines, looking for new victims for their failed strategies, completely ignoring the lesson we paid for at Cherkassy. We underestimated Russian strength, we underestimated their will, and most of all, we overestimated our own infallibility. That hole in our front will never truly be patched. It is the beginning of an end that rolls unstoppably toward the heart of Germany. I look at the map of the Eastern Front a week after the breakout. That great hole where the 8th Army once was now gapes like an open wound. The Allies in the West are preparing for invasion, and here in the East, we have burned our best divisions in senseless fortresses that stopped no one. Our tactic of immobility has become our greatest enemy. Instead of maneuvering, we chose to die in place. Every German general who survived today carries within him the fear of the cauldron, the fear that he will be the next one Berlin forgets in the snow. The map of Europe is changing, not millimeter by millimeter, but by entire provinces vanishing in the red flame we ignited ourselves with our arrogance. The film ends, but the snow over Ukraine continues to fall, covering thousands of nameless graves. The camera slowly pulls back from the map, which now shows all of Europe. The blue of German occupation is receding, shrinking, as the red and blue colors of the Allies choke it from all sides. That was the price of underestimation, the price of those critical weeks when we thought we were masters of destiny. Remember Cherkassy not as a battle, but as a warning of what happens when leaders become blind to reality and generals become slaves to protocol. The longest night for our army is just beginning, and the light at the end of the tunnel is actually the fire burning in Berlin. History is written with the blood of those who were not allowed to retreat, and the map you see before you. It is only a monument to their futile suffering.